All right. Try again. Pull this off. Oh, free network. Why are you being such a bitch, furry network? This keeps saying unknown error, unknown error, unknown error. Trying to post shit on here. Busy body work here. Wait, no. Is it? Again. Unknown error. Fuck it then. Let it continue to fail, I guess. Oh good, GPU memory full, my favorite. Oh, the off screens. There we go. Let's open this. Hey, that one actually succeeded. Okay, are we back in business now? Oh, you know what? I know what the problem usually is with Furry Network. Usually the title. The title being too long. And new Tumblr, that site's dead now. Twitter, that's dead now. That ain't gonna work. Twitter is pretty much a hellscape now. When is that's the other thing. When are they gonna put in like threads on this and what was main Goro? Oh, My Little Pony. I thought that was this one. There's two specialized My Little Pony pages. That's cute. This one. I have no idea. Oh, it's war. Okay. What about art economy? Using Safeway to commission artists. Yes, I'm an artist. Oh my god, another art site for me to register for. Another time. I want to work on this fucking project. I want to get some of these videos lined up. Speaking of which, there's one I can do real quick that I can edit. So do that real quick, get that out of the way. Google Docs. Google Docs, where are you? I'll introduce myself in case of anyone stopping by. I am craftyandy and we're doing art. I'm doing some video editing and video creation. Alright, let's do this. Alright. Hello, He's off. Hello, I'm craftyandy, and these are my thoughts. Well, the live-action Last Airbender show is still coming out. I don't want the same story again. Am I alone in this? Can we just treat animation as a medium instead of a genre? Make a sequel, a prequel, original characters within the same world even. The possibilities are endless. Time is limited. Who is interested in seeing... Who the fuck is calling me? It says United States. Hello? Fucking hate. My god, don't fucking call me. I don't have an AEP account, you stupid bitch. Get fucked. I see your call center burned down. The only people that should be allowed to call me are my immediate family and my friends. And that's it. Everything else should just be fucking blocked. If something's really important, come to my fucking house. Knock on the door. Anyways. Why do they continue to call me? Hey, bitch. Why is there no option to block this? I don't want to answer. I want to block this. How do I block this number? This. Alright. Phone calls, interruptions, and delays. Let's just delete this and start again. Uh-oh. What are these? Two of the same? Mass shooting. Got a community guideline strike. Even though it was a year old, it was already age restricted. Oh. Delete that. Let's try this again. Hello, I'm craftyandy, and these are my thoughts. Well, the live-action Last Airbender show is still coming out. Am I alone in this thought that I don't want the same story again? I don't want to rehash. I don't want to remix. Can we just treat animation as a medium instead of a genre? Make a sequel, a prequel, or original characters within the same world? The possibilities are endless. Who is interested in seeing the same story play out again? Destined to be offended when something is inevitably changed, cut, or scaled back. Then there's this One Piece show. Look, this anime is over 1,000 episodes long, and the idea of even thinking of making a story drag on for that amount of material kind of makes me sick, let alone watching it play out. But I will admit, the live-action trailer makes me curious about the anime. Only slightly. It took me long enough to get through all of the 7 Deadly Sins, and I'm looking forward to getting through Farscape before anything else, alright? And I don't really care that the original creator is behind this One Piece live-action show. I don't give a shit. It's useless. It's pointless. And let's stay focused on this live-action shit. There's only a few good anime to live-action adaptations. The Wachowski sisters' Speed Racer, for one. Here you have a goofy show with a lot of the humor coming from the janky animation, taking itself way too serious, with over-the-top stories involving superpowered cars, races where half the drivers seem to perish in high-speed crashes. One episode called The Mammoth Car involves a race featuring all types of drivers, with the Mammoth Car being a 500-foot-long behemoth that has an individual engine working each tire and also houses a gang of motorcyclists. And here's how Speed Racer casually drives to the beach. Scenes like this, and then there's scenes like this. Let's break that down. Speed has a gun on this guy, and he's thwarted by some playing cards. And that same guy drop kicks his ass from a prone position. Physics need not apply here. Speaking of which, here's the acrobatic racing team. Distractions. Okay, point is, the episodes are all self-contained. There's no overarching narrative to worry about. Aside from the basic setup, the Wachowskis went nuts with it. Bright colors, physics-defying action, simple-to-follow story, a cartoonish villain, beehive launchers. Can you imagine someone ever pulling a gun out on another driver over a official corporate-sponsored race? Thing is, the show was... So the show being episodic, everything tends to get resolved within a 40-minute time span. So with a movie, all you have to do is just get some key elements right, such as the characters, personalities, and the roles they play. There was never any sacred story arc or deep overarching tale to try and capture. Plus, the quality of the animation calls for some sort of revival to update this. I would be amiss if I didn't mention the remake of the Alita Battle Angel movie. I'm not familiar with the source material aside from skimming through some clips of the first adaptation, and aside from the live action movie being PG-13, it's well acted, well choreographed. I can actually tell what's going on in the action scenes. I only wish to have seen how this all concludes. I imagine with that sky sanctuary crashing to the earth, but like the collapse of our corporate overlords, it'll never happen since the movie didn't do well, because of course it didn't. This will remain a good example of how to do a live-action remake, simply because it at least remains faithful to the tone of the original, which you could say fell into obscurity over the years, further justifying any kind of remake, be it an animation or live action. When it's a serialized show like Death Note, Last Airbender, Attack on Titan, Fullmetal Alchemist, from a creative perspective, what is the goddamn point of trying to recreate these shows as live action and telling the same story, be it as a series or God help us a movie like the Fullmetal, or God help us a movie. Be it a series or God help us a movie like the Fullmetal Alchemist cosplay trilogy. Take the American attempt at a live-action Death Note. That movie took the cat and mouse aspect of that anime and turned it into some kind of teeny bopper basic bitch horror movie. Light Yagami is a genius with a superiority complex. Light Yagami is a genius with a superiority complex that shakes the world with his use of the Death Note, acting like a judgmental god of life and death. The whole story is around detectives, with the head of the group being L, trying to determine the killer's identity. The identity of a person who can kill simply by writing one's name in a Death Note. In the movie, he's portrayed as an angsty teen, easily manipulated by his girlfriend. In the movie, Light is portrayed as an angsty teen, easily manipulated by his girlfriend. He even gives up his identity 3/4 of the way through the movie to Detective L. He even gives up his identity 3/4 of the way through the movie to Detective L. L is a great detective in the anime, battling with his wits, brilliantly portraying through his tennis match with Light. L is a great detective in the anime, battling with his wits, which can be summed up through this tennis match with Light. In the movie, he's a unhinged, emotional, loose cannon that gradually... In the movie, he's a unhinged, emotional, loose cannon that gradually loses his composure throughout the movie. How much more inspiring of a concept would it be if this acted as a sequel that references the anime, but it's not necessary to watch in order to understand the plot? The way that Death Note works and what Shinigami are can be explained within a few sentences between a new set of characters without there being a need of exposition. It just seems like a no-brainer idea to make something that complements the already adequate story material, rather than trying to replace it, offending your general audience that would actually see this shit. Just treat animation as a medium and not a genre. If someone can't give a show a chance because it's animated, that's their fucking problem. And I doubt those same people, knowing a live-action show draws its source material from an animated version of itself, is appealing to most people at this point, let alone someone who was already dismissive of it. Now, we don't need a live-action How to Train... And while we're at it, one final thing, we don't need a live-action How to Train Your Dragon remake, alright? Unless you're making a redo of that fugly third movie, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want anything to do with it. I much rather binge some Toothless and Hiccup material on E621. These, however, are just my thoughts. And there we go. Alright. So rename this. Right. That in folder. Actually, you know what? One final thought. Unless you can do something incredibly new with the material, unless there's something you can do to improve the original material, do something unique. An example would be the 80s Blob remake compared to the original, the Thing remake compared to the original, something along those lines. Unless something like that is happening, like the Speed Racer movie versus the cartoon, don't fucking bother. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and I don't understand how anyone can even be interested in reliving the same story, but ultimately an inferior version of the original story. These are just my thoughts, though. Alright, iCloud Drive. Alright. That'll be when I get done this weekend, because it won't take that long. It shouldn't take that long, but it probably will. Anyways. Alright. So, we got the introduction. Some things we gotta do here. I know you bit. What is that beeping? All right.
The Demons Closing In. A couple of friends at my job were talking about their kids getting bullied at school. When I got home, I ended up with a series of flashbacks. I'm in my mid-30s, and here I am, alone in the dark, reading scenarios that have long since passed 20 years ago now. A breakdown, a series of past incidents flashing through my brain, driving me into a heavy breathing and tears. Why won't it stop? Why can't I get it out of my head? When will these mental phantoms leave? I was isolated as a child, mainly alone with my imagination and toys, confining myself away in my room, a solitary confinement for the most part. The setup is clear to me. Earlier, I had a few friends around kindergarten, preschool. They all soon moved away by the time I hit the... For him to call you then. He never called. So really at this point, I had no more real friends around me. The few friends I did make up until high school, one would be a grade behind, and the other a different school altogether. There was one other friend too, he was also a grade behind within the same school early on. So essentially, regardless, alone in the second grade, I had no friends, and my bullying experience began. I was reading a book about the stars and sharing interesting knowledge tidbits with the teacher, and a kid didn't like that too much. Without any prior interaction, he just looked at me and started calling me stupid. Yeah, stupid. No. Yeah, stupid. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You're stupid. This went off and on for a couple of years of him beating me up at the end of school. Sometimes I would try to fight back, but then he would just overpower me and put me back in my place. Sometimes I managed to get away if I ran fast enough. We grew up with these messages from various TV shows and parents that would just say, ignore them, walk away, tell a teacher. When what you should really do is wait for their back to be turned and then hit them with a heavy object and not worry about the results. It's not about winning a fight, it's about not being someone to fuck with. Too bad I never got that message. But all it takes is one major incident to alienate you from all your peers. This one individual and sometimes his other friend would alternate in this activity throughout the second and third grade. However, there's one major incident that happened alienated me from my peers for the next 6 years. It came ahead in the 4th grade. I got sick one day wearing a sweater in hot weather, and I puked in front of the whole class. There I am, The bell about to ring, everyone's at the door ready to leave, and I'm just nauseous as hell, and all of a sudden, right in the middle of the damn floor, bleh, chunks everywhere. Having no friends to begin with solidified my social status from then on. I was continuously singled out by my peers. And I mean nearly all of them. People I never knew the names of. I was the class plaything. Everything I did was wrong. How I talked, walked, dressed, having a Genesis over a Super Nintendo, the TV shows I watched.
There, got some things right there. Minutes, 15 seconds. Genesis.
Defined my social status from then on. I was continuously singled out by my peers. And I mean nearly all of them. People I never knew the names of. I was the class plaything. Everything I did was wrong. How I talked, walked, dressed, having a Genesis over a Super Nintendo, the TV shows I watched, imagination.
I'll never forget how much grief I got for having a Genesis.
Sports, no interest in music, all were used as fodder against me. In fact, I remember one time I was asked what one of my favorite shows was, and I said Power Rangers, and the entire class in the 4th grade laughed the shit out of me. So I knew right then and there to never express what I liked ever again, for risk of giving them further ammunition. Telling my parents in the school didn't resolve the issue, as many kids took their turns beating the shit out of me. Go figure. To spare the minute details, my loneliness and isolation started to compound. Despite having parents and a younger sibling, I subjected myself to solitary confinement in my room with a black and white antenna TV, Hot Wheels, and my budding imagination. Paranoia set in as I would black and white antenna TV, Hot Wheels, and my budding imagination. Paranoia set in as I would spend the majority of my time at home lost in my own head, often falling into delusions, thinking people were watching me, going through these fits, reliving scenarios, and having violent fantasies killing my tormentors in gory fashion. Again and again, the same incidents over and over, meticulously making sure the blinds in my room covered the windows fully so not to allow anyone to peek in, as if any of them might be watching. All this in between overindulging in the few video games I had and television I was bouncing off the walls. At times I tried to justify it, the torment that was happening to me, the singling out, the bullying, thinking that I was being punished for things I might do in the future. My kid logic proposing the idea of me being a murderer or serial killer or something of that nature. I was a little PTSD action boy.
For PTSD Action Man, danger lurks at every turn. He never feels safe. PTSD Action Man now comes with 1,000-yard stare action.
Anyways, at 10 years old, after yet another incident, I came home and held a knife to my gut. No one was home at the time, and as I was having flashes of gangs of half a dozen kids surrounding me after class, I was prepared to stab myself to end it all at 10 years old, sparing the world of my further existence. My mom came home as I contemplated my action. She calmly grabbed it away and said, if I did that, that would only make them happy. This incident has been burned into my brain so well that I would often look back and consider if I should have followed through with the action over the course of the next decade and a half. Later around that time, when the principal was notified, classmates scolded, and then my mother came to me in tears saying, I'm so sorry you're going through this. That just made me feel worse to see that. It made me feel like shit. This was my fault. I'm making my mother cry. So, efforts were made to stay quiet about my situations from then on. A lot of the days leading up to my teens consisted of coming home to, "How is your day, Andy?" "Good." "What did you do at school today? Did you learn anything?" "Nothing." And then I closed the door to my room in order to be alone until dinner was ready. In an effort to be ignored or possibly fit into some degree, I would refrain from expressing any more interest in anything, going so far as to be in denial if I liked something such as Power Rangers or Marilyn Manson, for example, not even enjoying it by myself, fearing that it would somehow come back to my peers and they would have yet more ammo to use against me, or rather, it was how I was supposed to be, I guess. More years use against me, or rather, it was how I was supposed to be, I guess. More years went by, and thinking middle school would be some reset button, I came to the realization that there was no real end. It was how I was supposed to be, I guess. They would have yet more ammo to use against me, or rather, it was...
I have no idea what I meant to say there. Where's the script? Let's see. I guess I just cut that out.
Ammo to use against me, or rather, would have yet more ammo to use, and it would somehow come, or Marilyn Manson, for example, not even enjoying it by myself. Not.
Okay, let's fix this. Not even when I was alone would I enjoy it by myself, because I was afraid of either my sister and brother finding out about it, my parents somehow being friends with the parents of my tormentors. Yeah. I would not even enjoy these things by myself for risk of my siblings seeing it and then it coming back. I would not even enjoy these things by myself for fear of it coming back on me by my peers. Let me just read the damn thing. I would not even allow myself to enjoy these things when I was alone, fearing that it would somehow come back to my peers and they would have yet more ammo to use against me. Whether it be my siblings witnessing it or my parents somehow being friends with the parents of my tormentors, I wasn't sure, but I just did not want any risk at all of yet more reasons to be hated. So yeah, I would force myself to I imagine to some degree this relates to a lot of people growing up, but I would pretend to hate things I didn't hate. I would pretend I would always listen and overhear and adapt to what the general consensus was in regards to pop culture and media. It was my way of sparing myself any more grief. There we go. Things I like. Insert. Where are you? There. Did it properly.
Power Rangers or Marilyn Manson, for example. Not even enjoying it. Supposed to be, I guess. Years went by, and thinking middle school would be some
For network unknown error again. Okay. Where are you? Oh, there it is. There, that should fix it. I forgot the Twitter shit. Oh well. I would not even allow myself to enjoy these things when I was alone. Fearing that it would somehow come back to my peers and they would have yet more ammo to use against me. Whether it be my witnessing it or my parents somehow being friends with the parents of my tormentors, I wasn't sure, but I just did not want any risk at all of yet more reasons to be hated. So yeah, I would force myself to I imagine to some degree this I imagine to some degree reasons to be hated. I imagine to some degree this relates to a lot of people growing up, but I would pretend to hate things I didn't hate. I would pretend I would always listen and overhear. I would always listen and overhear and adapt to
and adapt to what the general consensus was in regards to pop culture and media. My way of sparing myself any more grief. It was my way of myself any more grief. More years went by, and thinking middle school would be some reset button, I came to the realization that there was no real end in sight, and the mental breakdown started to really take effect. Just sitting in the library one day with other classmates, minding my own damn business, I was singled out again. One of them pointed to me and said I was probably a faggot. And then it started up again. New faces, some new names that I picked up from, and it continued on with every other class I went to. You see, when kids are picked on, it's often not with broken noses and being jumped in the locker room. It's little things to not leave much in the way of marks, shoves, light kicks, names. Kids are very smart that way, aside from not having yet to learn any empathy. I was a believer in the Christian God, and I spent the better part of the night begging him to make it stop. When it continued on in the 9th and 10th grade, including stolen lunches and being stabbed with pencils, I was quite a broken person at this point. Damaged goods. This was now in combination of my self-hatred related to my developed sexuality. Denying my bisexuality, instead I mostly had a number of fantasy kinks solidified into my headspace. The church had a nice sermon in the 6th grade that talked about how sexual deviancy was...
Let's see. Probably a good point to put an image there. Might as well, I don't know. Angry church preacher. But ripping off an image that likely is copywritten. We'll just use the AI generator. Do 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 do. Use Bing, see what Bing does. Podium. Standing at podium. Standing at a podium. Screaming at a large audience. Wow. Holding a cross. See what happens again. Man, these are some strange images. Let's see. They all look freaky deaky. this even more detailed. Let's keep refining the prompt a little bit. No. In a tattered suit, not the fucking Joker. Why is he in the middle of the aisle? Dressed. Tattered suit. This one looks freaky deaky. Why is he painted though? Realistic. Church preacher. White teeth. White teeth in the mouth. Short hair. And someone's getting worse. It just seems, when I say realistic, it just gives me a painting. Just type in church preacher. Fuck. my god, just because I typed in fire. Oh, fire pit. Okay. Because I have Bible. I'm holding a book. Yep, it's because I put Bible in there. Can't be controversial, make fun of religion now. Fuck you. Yeah, might as well. Creature might as well look like something like this.
And I mostly had a number of fantasy kinks solidified into my headspace. The church had a nice sermon in the 6th grade that talked about how sexual deviancy was whether gay or other would indeed send me to hell. It was moment. Indeed, send me to hell. It was at this moment that a incident in the 2nd grade I didn't even think about anymore came back to haunt me. Another boy my own age took advantage of me. That being my first sexual experience and a gay experience, all of a sudden was something I wasn't really thinking about, something I didn't pay any mind to, was now something that could potentially send me to hell in my mind. It was also yet another justification for why I was being singled out in school by my classmates and everyone else. School by my classmates and everyone else, thinking that this was yet punishment from God, punishment for committing the sin of homosexuality. The thing about trying to shame someone out of anything, be it a belief or a state of being, all that ends up doing is making that status stronger. It's a doom loop, a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're told not to think of X, to be ashamed of X, which causes you nothing but to think of X. There was no internet for me back then, all the way up until high school, so that cannot even be pointed to as any influence. It was all me, in combination of the loneliness, the shame, the loss of my own world. As I started to develop in the 5th grade, I turned into a freak. A repeated cycle of fantasy porn addiction that I didn't get over until I became accepting of myself and overcoming my insecurities. This was before I even got exposed to the first straight porno in the 6th grade. I was already gone. With all of that on me, I also had no prospects for the future, just trying to get through the day. I knew how to keep my head down really well now, to hide any sense of emotion, to keep it silent, all to myself, lest I give someone more fodder. I was ready to just go into the same engineering field as my father and call it from there. I was already convinced that I would never find a woman to love and marry. I just wanted to be left alone, like everyone said I would be. I was convinced. I woke up believing them. It started to form a catalyst in my mind, wishing for some divine end to the world. Repeatedly, I would read the book of Revelation in the Bible, just hoping for that moment one day, for everything to just collapse. And
let's see. Armageddon? I spell Armageddon, I can never figure that shit out. Okay. So do 2 D's. Because the English language is fucked up like that. Yeah, this kind of works. What happens when I type in like Y2K?
The disappointment I had when they just hoping moment one day. I woke up believing them. It started to form a catalyst in my mind, wishing for some divine end to the world. Repeatedly, I would read the book of Revelation in the Bible, just hoping for that moment one day, for everything to just collapse. For that moment, world. Repeatedly, I would read the book of Revelation in the Bible. Just hoping for that moment one day, for everything to just collapse. And oh, and the disappointment I had.
See, hopefully there's some good stuff in here.
Man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human life.
A silo triggered by the first minute of a new year. That sounds suspiciously like a Y2K malfunction.
Yes, General.
Our screens here indicate that in 32 hours' time,
Is that Malcolm
one of our
McDowell?
nasty little redbirds is going to launch itself from the Colombian jungles and take out Moscow. What do you do?
It's agreeing to accept the stand-down code.
Shut it down right away.
None of the current codes are working. The computer assures us that
Man, this is a movie written by people who don't know how to computer.
the codes are known only to Coca-Cola.
When the only person, who the hell is that, who can avert full-scale nuclear war, who held the code name Coco Leo, is unavailable.
Coco Leo, as I recall,
Ah.
Richard Nixon.
The Marine team has been ordered to meet at the specified checkpoint in 4 hours. My job is to regain control of our silo.
You're the key to this whole thing. I'm sure you know exactly what kind of global mess we'll have on our hands if that bird flies.
Oh, it will.
Damn it, it can't.
What is this about? I just see lots of people getting grabbed, explosions, guns, people flying in the air, traps.
Sometimes it's hard to win the game when you don't even know who's on your team. I ain't changing a thing. Louis Gossett Jr., James Woolbeck, Edward O. Ross, Sarah Chalk, Ishmael Carlo, and Malcolm McDowell. When midnight strikes, all bets are off. Y2K.
Man, I don't think the year 2000 was this extreme.
The vast majority of the evidence, on one level, it's because the Russians just have more power. They have a bigger army, they have more soldiers, they have more bombs, so their ability to do war crimes and do atrocities is just astronomically larger than what the Ukrainians have the ability to do. But also,
Man, I can't wait to hear this.
the way
I like Dylan Burns and I like Paul and like TJ.
that the
so.
Russians have engaged when it comes, for example, cluster munitions usage. The New York Times has reported that the Ukrainian military has used cluster munitions in like March and April of like 2022. So this isn't like a new phenomenon that's being introduced by the Biden administration, but
Well,
the
we're
way
just we're sending more.
Yeah, we're sending
I
more.
think that's the
We are
contention.
sending more. But the difference in how the Ukrainian military has used cluster munitions and the Russian military has used cluster munitions is also starkly different. With the amount of cluster munitions used on the Russian side and heavily populated, dense urban areas where civilians are still heavily present, being quite frequent, and them doing that very frequently. In Kharkiv especially, that was a very big issue because once they failed to take the city, they got really angry, and then they took out all their rage and frustration by just shelling the city day in, day out for months, killing tons of civilians. And so, while it is true that there are war crimes on every side of any war ever, the military culture of the Russian military and the Ukrainian military is still starkly different. Just like the American military had a very different military culture than the Japanese. The American military committed a ton of war crimes during World War II, but it wasn't anywhere close to what the Japanese did because of the military culture and of the propaganda that was propagated about the Chinese and about the Americans and what they were like and why it was okay what they were doing to them. And in Russia right now, if you go in Russian state media, you'll see constant justification of war
Man,
crimes.
we saw a lot of dehumanization of Japan. Wait, there was a lot of dehumanization of Japanese people, and
there was a lot of dehumanization
I mean,
of
almost
Japanese
the
people.
ultimate
That is true.
form of dehumanization of Japanese people here in the United States.
We put them in internment camps here, for fuck's sake.
That is true.
Well, I mean, so like, there was definitely a lot of like, it's okay to do stuff to the Japanese because they're like subhuman mongrels. Like that messaging was very present.
Yeah, absolutely.
In American wartime propaganda, for sure.
That's true. My main point is though that the military cultures were different at the time, and the amount of war crimes and how that was encouraged and how that was protected by the Japanese regime, the culture was different, and that created a higher propensity to do.
But I mean, you're talking about
atrocities.
two different cultures with two different sets of like values, where what might seem reasonable to one could seem absolutely barbaric to another, and so on and so forth, especially in wartime. And of course, everyone in wartime also is going to spin how the actions of their side are all these wonderful acts of self-defense, and the actions of the other side are all these horrible, nightmarish things that are so beyond the pale and evil that anyone would condemn them. But the reality is that both sides are probably engaging in a little bit of evil. But my main problem with the arms thing is still just like, you take an explosive situation where two factions are at war with one another. Whoever's right, whoever's wrong. You start releasing more and more powerful weapons into that situation. Like, you don't know what the fuck the result of that is going to be. And America's made this mistake before. I mean, we're the arms dealers of the world, and a lot of times the
America
weapons
bad,
that we
TJ. America bad.
Well, America can be pretty bad sometimes.
I mean, well, that's kind of one of the frustrating things that I've run into in talking about this, is that if you try and point out America's horrible track record of involvement in countries that are at war with one another and factions within those countries that are at war with one another, you get called, an America bad person. And the opposite of that is Russia good in people's minds, and that's as far as their minds go. I mean, you can look here in
the Japanese
our chat.
were not undisciplined. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, they were the opposite.
They were
there's a lot of
extraordinarily
stupid people in the chat tonight.
Shut up. That's fucking absurd.
But in the chat, you can see that that narrative already being spun. There are people whose brains just shut down.
I'm glad the chat is having a lively discussion. I don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
So I do believe the United States has, of course, sent weapons to people we shouldn't have sent weapons to, but we also have sent weapons to people we should have sent weapons to. The Lend-Lease program, I think, was an incredibly effective program. And I'm using the World War II example, but that's, normie foreign policy take, right?
Well, sure. World War II is probably more accessible to most people than.
Yeah, that's the thing. People complain about using World War II as an example all the time. And
I don't complain. I don't complain about a vivid example that everyone fucking gets quickly. So it's fine with me.
I gotta say something while this is going on live.
Case by case basis when we make decisions like this. I don't think it's as
this is
simple
where
as.
I think the nature of our fundamental disagreement, because I don't think it's ever a good idea.
It's never a good idea to send any country weapons.
No, I don't think it is.
So if Vladimir Putin went on TV tomorrow, right, and he said,
"All right, hypothetical, let's go."
Yeah, I love hypotheticals for this because I don't think anybody is this starkly like never ever send weapons or always.
Well, I mean,
never think anybody's.
I
Like,
think
opposites.
I think a principle is pretty worthless if there's not going to be some kind of exception. But you're gonna have to paint a pretty vivid picture for me to be like, all right, I guess we could do it then. But go ahead.
So if a country, if Vladimir Putin was to go on TV tomorrow and he was to say the equivalent of like, look, the goal is to make Ukraine not exist. Ukraine isn't real. Ukrainians aren't real. It's all fake. They're a bunch of Nazis. We need to destroy and eradicate the Nazi
Isn't
menace.
that basically not a hypothetical? Isn't that basically Putin's position?
This is Putin's position. Yes, this is
Okay.
Putin's position. But I'm just throwing this out there.
Sure.
Now he's already said all these things, right? And this has led to an extremely brutal campaign of war and destruction.
Sure.
And my question to you is, how does us sending weapons to Ukraine that they then use to push back this brutal occupation, which I know neither of you support, I'm not gonna like straw man either of you. How does this materially make the situation worse? What's a realistic scenario? Because I want to hear your hypothetical where it becomes worse because we sent these weapons.
The realistic scenario for me where it becomes worse is a scenario that I think, probably played out a few times before, which is, all sending these weapons does is prolong the war that Ukraine is destined to lose. Ukraine loses the war. Russia seizes the territory, and whatever is left of those weapons end up being Russian weapons.
So
another thing is another scenario. Ukraine becomes so destabilized that, and maybe they repel Russia, but there's the infrastructure and everything is so fucked by the time they're done that there are now warring factions within Ukraine fighting for power. And these weapons end up being used in a gigantic civil war.
This is one of the things that I get shit for when I bring it up. I'm not trying to claim that the political situation is the same, but I think that there are a lot of comparisons to be drawn in Afghanistan. We're talking about America trying to push back, trying to assert its hegemony over the earth and push back against what it perceives as communist hegemony, right? Mm-hmm. You support, one of my favorite examples to cite when I'm talking about this is it Rambo First Blood Part 2?
I think it's First Blood, the Mujahideen thing, yeah?
First Blood.
Yeah, where Rambo goes to Afghanistan to fight the Russians.
First Blood. Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Part 2. I think that's it.
The name and scheme of those movies.
The disappointment.
But if you look at that, it's a really interesting time capsule.
And none of the
at that point in America, the media narrative was, here are these poor, oppressed people, and by supporting them with military engagements and weapons deliveries and training for their fighters, we're enabling these people to fight for their freedom and their autonomy. Mm-hmm. What ended up happening in Afghanistan was, as soon as they were successful in pushing the Russians out, and a huge linchpin in the dissolution of the Soviet Republic in general, after that happened, the country factionalized, and these very self-same weapons were used to oppress the people of those countries as warlords and factions squabbled over power. And then you see the narrative shift super starkly in the early 2000s with 9/11, and now these people are evil, they're scum, they're literally doing violence on their own populations with American weapons, using American training. And these are the bad guys. And now American soldiers are invading Afghanistan, getting killed by American weapons that were put there. I think this bolsters TJ's point of dumping a bunch of fucking weapons in the middle of a really destabilized, war-torn region has far-reaching consequences that oftentimes are hard to judge.
And really hard to predict.
So, as for the idea of the Russians getting the weapons, I don't think there's really a scenario where they could end up with the majority of these weapons unless they were to make Ukraine as a state itself submit and could totally capitulate. Because the Ukrainians, no matter what, are going to have to preserve the weapons because they need their weapons, because if this war doesn't finish this issue, as in the Russians are not kicked out, there's a decent chance that the war is going to kick up again in 5 to 10 years, right? And that's another point I always want to.
There's a decent chance that this war is still raging on in 5 to 10 years.
A 10 year. I don't. At the current pace of
in
violence,
the era, in the era of forever war. In the nobody thought that the Afghanistan war would last fucking close to 30 years.
The war. Well, okay. What? There's so much I want to respond to.
Okay, go ahead.
So as for this war, when we talk about the war in Iraq, the war lasted 28 days, and then you had a very long occupation, right?
See, to me, there's no distinction.
You gotta let me finish my point. Okay. So the war was for 28 days, and then there was a long occupation. Now that was still a war in a way, a war against Al Qaeda, different resistance groups, a bunch of different things. But the Russians haven't gotten past the first part. They haven't gotten past the invasion. In fact, they haven't gotten even that fairly deep into the invasion, as in taking the capital, taking over all the government hotspots. They don't even have air superiority, right? So the scenario in my mind of the Russians completely making the Ukrainians capitulate, that idea was smashed a month into the war. So I don't see how those weapons are going to transfer from the Ukrainian government over to the Russian government if the Ukrainian government has every incentive in the world to stop them from happening. Stuff gets captured in battle.
It's not an intentional thing, right? But you said earlier, you conceded that Ukrainian people have already been killed by weapons that were given to Ukrainians.
Well, yes, like I was about to say, you can overtake a position and find a rifle given to them by the United States and then use that against the Ukrainians. But the vast majority of this firepower is being used by the Ukrainians, like 98 to 99% of it is used by the Ukrainians to push back against the Russians and capture Russian equipment. The #1 tank supplier of Ukraine right now is the Russian military. Poland, I think, is number 2 with like 600 tanks or something like that. It is the most overwhelmingly, it is the Ukrainians capturing Russian equipment and the Russians abandoning Russian equipment. That seems to be the standard right now. There have been instances of it happening the other way, but I don't think that there is enough of American equipment being captured in the field for it to make a demonstrable difference in Russia's ability to destroy Ukraine. Definitely not enough to overbalance the amount of aid that the weapons is giving the Ukrainians in defense against the Russians. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't be asking for the weapons, and if it wasn't the case, we probably wouldn't have seen so much success on the battlefield by the Ukrainians from using these Western-backed munitions, which they used to take back the rest of the Kharkiv Oblast, which they used to take back Kherson, which they're currently trying to use to take back Zaporozhye and the rest of the Kherson Oblast through this current counteroffensive. And they might even use to take back Bakhmut. So who knows exactly what they're going to take. I'm not going to promise that they're going to win the war, but my main point is
Russia might retake one of those previous, you know what I mean? Like I do not agree that it's out of the realm of possibility that 10 years on this conflict could still be going.
Not at
the
let me be
experience.
Not in the way that it's currently going. It might become a frozen conflict, but when we talk about the rate of death and destruction, I don't see the Russians and the Ukrainians being able to sustain this for 10 years. I mean, there's a possibility where maybe backed by a very stubborn West, continuing to support the Ukrainians, they could support it financially and maybe with munitions. But the Russians, I mean, they've burnt through a very significant portion of their tank stockpile in a year and a half. I think like 30 to like 35% of it already. And so I don't see how they keep that up for another 9 years. They don't have the production capacity. They don't have the foreign exports. So I just don't think it's like financially even feasible. The Russian government has seen its, I think, energy profits and government revenues drop by about 50%. They've increased military spending by 200 to 300%. So I understand like the idea makes sense, but it's just not. I don't think it's financially or physically feasible with just the materials that both sides have for it to last that long.
Don't they have? I mean, it's my understanding that Russia is operating on a very capitalistic fiat type of currency. Why don't they just do what we do when we're $1 trillion plus in the
ruble
hole and just
the ruble is sadly not
money.
that strong. They've introduced a lot of like price controls to the ruble, and that actually led to the ruble being on paper very strong like a month to 2 months into the war, where they were talking about like record strength. But recently a lot of these artificial controls have started to break down. A lot of investors are trying their best to pull their money out, but the Russian government is literally banned people from taking their money out of the ruble. They're doing everything they can to protect it, and it's still losing value. I think it hits a really bad point recently with the Wagner coup, with it, I think, going up to like dropping to like a 95, like really like 95 in comparison to like the USD. Really.
Yeah, I'll listen to that tonight.
What if they're right?
Gotta fix this audio.
Y2K the movie. The NBB.
Uh-oh. How do I fix this? The left was right. That's right. Fill. See? Alright, how about add track and mono track? Somehow that just makes it quiet. Interesting. The fuck?
The NBC. Y2K the
There we go.
What if they're right?
It came to be.
What if they're right? Y2K the movie, NBC, November 21st.
There were journals, pretentious, arrogant journals of how fucked up the world was, and the question whether or not it's worth killing anyone over. I don't know if I would have been willing to do it if I had access to any weapons or guns, but thankfully I had no such access. Since my only two friends were on the outside and they had no weapons themselves that I could potentially steal, but more importantly, being that they were on the outside, I never opened up to them about any of my emotions or what I was going through in my school or by myself. Reason being, previously I had a number of people throughout my school life claiming to be or pretending to be my friend, only to turn on me when pressure of our fellow peers came down on them for daring to hang out with me. So to no fault of my two friends, mind you, I didn't want to say anything that could risk either of them disowning me. Despite making some conversations with a few of my peers in the middle grades regarding either current video games or shows we liked, I never tried to go beyond that basic connection. Almost like I was at the same time in denial of my social status. It's hard to describe these days, like I had some chances to make some actual friends. However, I found myself thinking I was still above these certain people's level. These anime, Magic the Gathering nerds. Or perhaps it was that I didn't want to risk being rejected yet again from another potential friend group. In fact, I made efforts to fit in with the crowd, despite all the video friend group. In fact, I made efforts to fit in with the crowd. Despite all the video games, television, and R-rated movies, the behavior I picked up on was by my peers, and I acted upon it accordingly. Times I sought to fit in included a few incidents in elementary school that stick out in my mind. There was this kid called Tide Boy. He was called Tide Boy because he wore a tie.
Yes. Yes? I love you. Don't remember.
Hat to school one day, and that made him a target. It was the Tide logo you'll see on a lot of juices in the grocery store.
Apparently I was wrong. I was thinking of different. I was thinking of Ocean Spray. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Oops.
Wore a Tide hat to school one day, and that made him a target. Juices in the grocery store.
Maybe a JPEG image. Good.
He was called Tide Boy because he wore a Tide hat to school one day, and that made him a target. Him a target. I never saw the kid, but when his hat was being vandalized, I gladly joined in. Another involved this screeching autistic child around the same year. I assume he was autistic because he wouldn't communicate with words, just shrieks and smiles. A crowd of kids gathered at one point, throwing pebbles, poking him with sticks. He would just screech and smile, and his face not even saying any words. In retrospect, it's clear that he should have been in some kind of... It's clear that he should have been in some kind of special program, but even then, for a brief moment,
Nope.
But even then, for a brief moment, I joined in the torment. It was a good feeling fitting in for a day. And there was my Christian church youth group. This was overall a relief from the stress at school. I was seen more of a one-liner throwing jokester there. We would play group games, and even though no one ever offered to... We would play group games, and I was seen more of a one-liner throwing jokester there.
Is that there?
We would play group games, and I did make a single friend there that we hung out a few times, but then he stopped calling me, and I didn't feel like calling him. Everyone else, no one else ever offered to me. No one else ever offered to. Calling him. No one else offered to invite me to anything outside of the youth group. I was mainly left alone and not singled out in any negative way, unlike a slightly larger kid that was there. Ah yes, the same bullshit in public secular school went on at the church youth group. Cliques, gossip, and the youth group. Cliques, gossip, and the occasional fight. Just like secular school, where you occasionally have a teacher fucking... Just like secular school, where you occasionally have a teacher fucking one of the students, one of our youth pastors...
Where's the lavender story? Is this it? Yep, there it is. Need a little quick sound recording here. How you doing, Miss Lavender? How you doing these days, Miss Lavender, ever since your fling with a fellow teenage student? Fellow? It wasn't a fellow. Hello, Miss Lavender. How are you? Hello, Miss Lavender. How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender, after fucking one of your students? Miss Lavender fucked her student. He was the food teacher at my school, and she still fucked one of the students there. It's too bad it couldn't have been me. How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender, after fucking one of your students? How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender, after fucking one of your students? On a boat? Damn. Fucking one of the students. How are you doing these days? Students. How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender, after fucking one of your students? I said it twice, whoops. Generally have a teacher fucking one of the students. How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender, after... Teenage student fellow these days, Miss Lavender. How you doing, Miss Lavender? How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender? Miss Lavender. Miss Lavender. There we go. Miss Lavender. One of our youth pastors had a relationship with a 14-year-old girl in between sessions, teaching us about the invisible space Nazi in the sky. One of our youth pastors had a relationship with a 14-year-old girl in between sessions, teaching us about the invisible space Nazi in the sky. That's better take. Have a teacher fucking one of the students. How are you doing these days, Miss Lavender? One of our youth pastors had a relationship with a 14-year-old girl in between sessions, teaching us about the invisible space Nazi in the sky. Anyways, yes, there was a few kids singled out in our little youth group, and I gleefully joined in there, making jokes and comments about their looks and appearance in order to be part of that crowd. It still didn't get me any friends outside of that group, though.
group, though. There was no connection to my two younger siblings either. Instead, I became a bully at home due to the stress at school. I first became a bully to my younger sister, and she became a bully to her younger brother. Luckily, I would mature out of this mindset, becoming more self-aware of what the fuck this all was. It was a deranged attitude, picking on every little thing, how they talked, how they walked, the stupid questions they would have as if they were supposed to just magically know the answers to. Luck would come to me, though, early in high school with my friend John. He and his dad decided to give me a ride home. Supposed to just magically know the answers to. Luck would come to me, though, early in high school with my friend. Luck would come to me, though, early in high school with my friend John. He and his dad decided to give me a ride home one day to spare me the walk in the rain. We connected through our love of video games, mainly StarCraft, and he became the first person I could fully trust. And he became the first mainly StarCraft.
Fuck it. Let's keep getting the images as I get it. That seems to be faster than doing fucking notes. Seriously.
We connected through our love of video games, mainly StarCraft, and he became the first person I could fully trust. Not that I didn't trust any of my other two friends, I just purposely never told them anything because we came together to have fun and chill. They were one of the few escapes I had to the dark thoughts building up inside of me. In fact, many years later, I come clean with everything just as I did with John in my mid-teens to adulthood. But since me and John were in the same school and same grades together, I couldn't hide anything from him. I was in a position to open up other things to him, such as my cringe-inducing journals about wanting to kill all my peers, the scenarios I would relive over and over and over again. Even up until my early 30s, they creep back into my head. Failing to catch myself, wasting mental energy, reimagining these scenarios in my favor, playing out violent revenge fantasies, stabbing kids in the eyes with pencils, punching their throats until their pipes clenched shut, cracking their skulls in with desks and chairs.
And now to
jolting. This shocking video is making the rounds on social media. This violent fight is between a male and female student in a Coral Springs High School.
He's gonna knock you out.
Oh shit!
Oh, this sounds familiar. This is all very familiar.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Holy shit!
Erica, sit down.
Bet you won't hurt him. Oh shit! Hey! Hey, that's a fucking door! Hey, bro!
Eugene's gonna come back.
Hey, Alan, bro, if you come in with the gun, I'm done.
Hey, you even have the idea. Comments disabled, of course. Oh yeah, I gotta be careful because YouTube might nail me for that. We can have the videos up here, but no, we can't. Are you fucking kidding me?
I need help in here. Oh.
He just threw he threw a chair at the teacher. Are you kidding me? Just imagine if that teacher had a... And don't we want to arm teachers? Weren't they talking about constantly arming teachers with guns? Like... I'm just saying. You know, get the right circumstances going. The teacher might just pull that shit out and pop the kid instead.
I completely forgot her dad was there.
Fuck this shit. Get out.
Go, yeah, what a setup.
Fuck this shit. Get out.
With desks and chairs, The Darkest It Got can only be compared to the movie The Final, where a bunch of high school kids trick their peers into coming to a party out in the middle of nowhere, and then one by one they disfigure and disable them.
Right, gotta grab that clip. The final, the final, the final. Alright, well, it's time for me to go. Good night.
Skulls in with desks and chairs. The Darkest It Got can only be compared to the movie The Final, where a bunch of high school kids trick their peers into coming to a party out in the middle of nowhere, and then one by one they disfigure and
Remember we learned that 72 inch one.